Hey everybody.
Greetings.
Hello. Kapla.
Hey, Paul, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, you sound good. How you doing today?
I'm not too bad. Not too bad.
Good, good. So I don't know what's going on with the times right now. I didn't know if it's still an hour ahead of us or now or what was it?
Well, we had a time change too.
Yeah, I
I
realized
don't know
that.
if that affects the 6 o'clock aspect of GMT. That's why I want to use the converters, because like it'll keep you right on top of it with time changes and stuff.
Okay. Well, it looks like
I cannot be responsible for everybody's time zone. It's just not. It's too much.
right. That's why I just left it vague. Hey, there's Russia. Kirill, can you hear us?
Yes, Mike, I can hear you. How are you, bro?
Good, my friend. Good.
Kapla.
Kapla. Chris, are you gonna go on to a video today or no?
Yeah, I will in a moment. Yeah, the reason I asked about the time zone is because the last Zoom post that came across just had Edmonton time. It didn't. I didn't see a GMT time, and so
Yeah.
that's what I was looking. That's the only one I saw. And so when I tried to convert from that, it gave me one time, and then Mike was telling me a different time. So I was just like, "Are we going by based on that 1 p.m.?" And nobody would.
Chris.
Hey, no, I couldn't get an answer, so I wasn't sure what was going on.
Oh, okay.
GMT right now is different. We're 4 hour, like they haven't switched time zones yet in the UK, and so it's off. There's like a 2 week, 3 week period where the EU is still on winter time, and the US and Canada is on summertime, and so it like throws everything off.
Right.
That's why in Russia we canceled changing winter time to summer and back again.
Yeah, the USA is working on that. It's in Congress right now. That'll still take a few weeks. Murphy, are you gonna join us with a video today or no? Finland.
little bit difficult here. I no. I
No,
think
okay.
I found it. No,
Oh, hey, there you go. How you doing, Murphy?
Hello, Murray.
pretty good. Pretty good.
Good.
Little bit coffee.
That's right. Okay, I just remembered. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So you stay quiet as long as you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I did get another application from Finland 2 days ago, but I'm wait. Yeah, it's a guy. I'm waiting to hear back from his email to see if he's fully intent on joining. Because I don't let him in until I actually speak with them, or in this case, email with them. Okay, so as soon as he gets back to me, I will definitely let you know.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Glad that you can make it today. How you feeling? Okay.
Pretty good.
Okay, you can use
Not-
hand gestures like okay. Good, good. All right. I heard from Poland, she will not be able to make it today. I don't know about Israel, if they're able to make it, or Japan or Australia. I'm not sure. Hey, there's Dr. Okrand. Okay.
I sent Mark an email letting him know that we started the meeting. I just hope he gets it.
Alrighty.
Dr.
Hey, there he is.
Okrand. It's nice to see you. Finally.
Hello, Dr. Okrand.
Kapla, Dr. Okrand. Can you hear us, Dr. Okrand? I think there is troubles with connection.
Maybe.
There.
Or maybe this is, oh, Dr.
Oh, there we
Okrand.
go. Hello, Dr. Okrand.
Kapla.
I'm Mark.
Okay, Mark. Welcome to our group, sir. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm sorry. I guess I'm on. I don't know. Couldn't figure out the time at all with the time zone. But anyway,
We were just talking about that, sir. Yes. Well, sir, as you see here, we have a Paul Carrio in Canada. I'm Mike McVeigh in Chicago. Kirill, he is in Russia. Murphy down there, she's from Finland, but she's having a little throat problems today. And of course, you know Chris there, Kirk from KLI.
you actually do this instead of me. He knows everything. So.
And on behalf of the Klingon Assault Group Global Fleet, welcome here and thank you so much for your time, sir.
Oh, this has been great. This will be good. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I would like to, housekeeping. Check your status bars on the bottom. You may be able to record this on your own machines. If not, I'm already recording it. And we should have about 40 minutes before Zoom tells us to go.
Okay, Mark, it looks like we're going to have somebody from Sweden joining us in a few seconds. There he is.
Great.
Frederick, check your audio and say hello. See if we can hear you.
Yeah, it just Zoom shows us the wrong device, but I should be on the correct one now.
Okay, Frederick, good to see you today. How you doing?
But I can't hear you.
Hello.
Sound check, 1, 2, 3. Sound check, 1, 2, 3.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
And
Yes, I can
that's
hear
weird.
you.
I can hear you now at least. So
Okay, Frederick, Paul said check your status bar. And if you want you to try to see so you can record it yourself. So there's a backup. So we don't have to rely on a group recording. Okay.
well, I don't have permission to record it.
Okay, I assigned permissions when I set this up, but obviously that didn't work. In any event, I am recording it and it will be available for the website.
I also don't have permissions for recording.
Okay. When I initially set it up, I did set that everybody could record it, but I guess it didn't take. There's just a little button you press, you know, can anybody record it? Yes. Okay. I thought I had done it.
Oh, well.
Well, host,
Yeah.
well, only host can give permission for recording. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
that's Zoom.
I just clicked on it and a box came up, said, please ask the host to give you permission to record.
How do I do that?
Same for me.
Okay.
Sorry, Mark, just a little housekeeping before we start.
This is normal Zoom procedure. Yeah.
Alrighty.
No,
Yeah,
I have nothing here that I can, I have nothing here that,
to share the
Yeah.
permission with.
I think you have to go to the chat list, and then you may be able to click on the little more button that appears when you put your mouse over somebody, and then allocate extra permissions and stuff that way.
okay. Okay, Mark, why don't you take it off while I play with this?
Oh, okay. Good.
Yeah.
Well, let me talk a teeny bit. Let this be mostly, I think, questions from you, so that this can go whichever direction you want it to go in. But just to sort of set things up a little bit. Well, I guess you know who I am. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But let me give a little bit of background anyway. I got involved with Star Trek. 40 years ago this month, my God. Yeah, it was March of 1982 is when I got into this, and it was not Klingon, it was Vulcan. In Star Trek II, as you know, there's a short little scene where Spock and
Red of
talk
Canada.
in Vulcan, and that scene was originally when they filmed it, the actors were speaking English, but in post-production they decided that they should be speaking Vulcan, so they were going to hire a linguist from the University of California in Los Angeles to come up with the plan was to basically come up with gobbledygook, with nonsense that sounded very different from the English dialogue that was there, but looked the same on the lips. And then the actors would dub it in the way you dub in another language for a foreign film. And I don't know what happened to that linguist from that university, but it never worked out. And I happened to, this sounds silly, but it's true. I happened to be, by chance, having lunch at Paramount with a friend of mine who was the secretary, not secretary, you have a better title than that, the assistant, executive assistant or something, to Harve Bennett, who was the executive producer of that movie. And she told me, or actually a friend of hers who was also working on the film, told me about this story. And I'm a linguist by training. And I told them I thought that was a good idea. And they said they thought it was a good idea too. But it wasn't working out for some reason with this guy from who they'd been talking to. Not for any bad reasons. It was things like scheduling. And they said they weren't quite sure what they were going to do because they had to have it taken care of right away. And I was out in Los Angeles for work because I don't live there. Actually, it was for work on the Oscars, which is also relevant because the Oscars are tomorrow. And I said, what do you mean it has to be done right away? And they said, it has to be done by the end of this week, which is exactly how long I was in town to work on the Oscars. And I said, well, I can do that. And because I thought about how to do it when they told me what was being involved. And my friend said, yeah, he can do that. He's got the same kind of degrees as those other people do. And at that point, the associate producer walked by and they told him they'd solved the problem about the Vulcan language. And the producer said, what are you talking about? So they told him, and the producer said, come see me after lunch. And that's how that happened. Now I knew the producer, I knew the executive producer, Harv Bennett. I'd known him for years in a totally separate, non-Star Trek, non-movie making context. So it was ultimately his decision to hire me. So he wasn't hiring someone he never heard of, but it was still a big fluke that it came together. So I made up gobbledygook nonsense that matched the lips that Kirstie Alley, who played Savik, was supposed to say, and the same thing for Leonard Nimoy. Worked with the actors on 2 different days, not at the same time. I worked with Kirstie first, and a couple of days later, worked with Leonard Nimoy. Got him to say this stuff. At that point, I had lots of work to do on the Oscars, so I drove away from Paramount to wherever the Oscars were, thinking that I, had just taught Mr. Spock how to speak Vulcan, which was pretty cool, and thought that would be the end of that. That was fun. I got to do a little linguistic stuff. I got to work in a movie, and I got to work on Star Trek, which is the biggest deal. But I thought that was the end of it until about a year and a half later, when Harv Bennett called me and said, well, we're making another movie, and the villains are going to be the Klingons. And he said, I think, meaning I, Harv Bennett, think that the Klingons should speak their own language in this movie. You did Vulcan, you want to do Klingon? And that's how I got to do Klingon. Although Klingon was very different, because Klingon was not gobbledygook, lip syncing at all. Klingon was supposed to be a real language. Harv and I talked about it and said, in order to make it, we want it to sound real, and in order to make it sound real, it has to be real. So that's what I did. I made up a language. There was a teeny bit of Klingon before me. In the original series, there was none, except for people's names. We know there's such a thing as the Klingon language, because in The Trouble with Tribbles, which is, of course, the famous episode, there's a line that one of the Klingons says to the Enterprise crew, something along the lines of, everybody knows, well, the Enterprise is designed like a garbage scow. Everybody knows that, and that's why half the quadrant is learning how to speak Klingon. Right? He says Klingonese. Actually, he says Klingonese, but anyway. But we don't hear anybody speak Klingonese. He continues to speak English anyway, and all the Klingons in the original series only spoke English. In the first movie, as you know, the very, very beginning of the movie is the Klingons. And the Klingons look a little bit different from the way they did in the original series. Apparently, there's a footnote here, apparently in Strange New Worlds, the new series that starts pretty soon, they sort of pay attention to the fact that the Klingons look different in the original series and look different in movie time and Next Generation time and all that stuff. Anyway, but the Klingons also, that we see at the beginning of the motion picture, speak their own language. There's maybe 6 lines, maybe 8 lines, spoken by the lead Klingon guy, the captain of the, I assume, the main ship of the 3, played by Mark Leonard, who, mostly played Spock's father, but also played a Romulan, so he kind of did everything. Those lines were made up by sort of 2.5 people. Originally, the lines for that, and it was not lip syncing. He spoke it on the set. Originally, the lines for that scene were made up by a linguist from UCLA named Helmut Scharf, who also did the Vulcan for that film. But apparently, they didn't like the lines for some reason or other, the producers. I don't know what the deal was. So one of the producers, John Polville, and one of the actors, Jimmy Doohan, got together and made up some lines for Mark Leonard to say. And that's where that Klingon comes from. They paid a lot of attention to what it should sound like and little or no attention to the grammar and vocabulary and stuff like that. So when I came along for Star Trek 3, I looked at those 6 lines, whatever it was, and said, okay, that's Klingon. There's no question about that. And wrote down the sounds that I was hearing, wrote down the words. I didn't know what the words were, or in the sense of what they meant or how they worked grammatically. You know, there was a phrase, cha yirush. All right, it's 3 syllables, that's for sure. Is it 1 word or 2 words or 3 words? I don't know. Nobody knows. And if it's 2 words, is it 1 syllable then 2 or 2 syllables then 1? I don't know. So I just imposed a structure on what was there and imposed a meaning on what was there based on pretty much nothing. And then it grew and grew and grew from there. And I made up Klingon versions of all the lines that were to be spoken in Star Trek 3. And then made up Klingon versions of all the lines that were supposed to be spoken by Klingon speaking English in Star Trek 3, because sometimes they spoke Klingon and sometimes they spoke English. I'm talking when they're talking to each other, I'm talking about. Most of the time they spoke English rather than Klingon. But I made up Klingon versions of those lines anyway, just in case while we were filming, somebody said, hey, why is that guy talking English? You should be talking Klingon. I could say, okay, here, say this. They used 0 of those lines. Okay, all the lines that were supposed to be in English stayed in English, but it did help flesh out the language a lot. So it was a good thing to do. Actually, they were aware of the fact that it was strange that the Klingons were talking English to each other a lot rather than Klingon. And in the script, there's actually a paragraph at the beginning explaining why this is happening. And what they say, and I'm not going to say this exactly right, but it's along the lines of Klingon society is hierarchical. There's higher and lower classes, and the higher classes are better educated. The higher classes tend to be the military folks, and they're better educated. And part of a good education is foreign languages. So the highly educated people speak Klingon and something else, maybe several other things. And the lower class Klingons, not so much. They just speak Klingon. And the higher class Klingons use the non-Klingon language as a way to sort of differentiate themselves from the lower classes, to sort of show off that they're the higher classes, we're the smart guys, and also to keep secrets. Okay, that was the sort of the explanation in the script. The real reason there was so much English rather than Klingon spoken by Klingons is because they didn't want to have too many subtitles, because after all, Americans don't like subtitles. So that's what I did. And then of course, you know, there was more in Star Trek 5 or the 6. There's nothing in Star Trek 4 because the language there is whale language. That's something else. And Next Generation, and then on we go. And it grew in ways that I had never expected at all. When we were filming Star Trek 3, there was a lot of interest in the language. A lot of the crew, meaning the filmmaking crew, was interested in what this language was all about. And they would come up to me and say something in Klingon. And I would say, what do you want me to say? And they would say hello, how are you? I'd say a Klingon would never say hello, how are you? You know. Anyway, I got the idea, got the notion that since these movie making people were so interested in this, that Star Trek fans might be interested in this as well, and proposed the idea of writing a book explaining how the language works and the powers that be at Paramount and Simon and Schuster, which is the publisher that Star Trek stuff came out on. They thought it was a good idea too, so I wrote this little book called The Klingon Dictionary, and that, except that that's the newer one. uh, the old one's a little blue book. And it came out, and I thought that what was going to happen with it is that I hope people would buy it, be interested in stuff. But I thought mostly what would happen is people would look at it and thumb through it and say, oh, look, here's the Klingon word for shoe, ha, 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 and put it down and pick it up every once in a while. And I was right about the fact that people bought it. It's so okay. It wasn't astounding, but it's okay. I was wrong about the fact that people would just thumb through it, because people read it and reread it and analyzed it and took notes about it and compiled a list of the typos and so on. And it kind of started taking off. I did not know this was happening until after the second edition came out, the white one, the one with the white cover. That came out in 1992, I think, after Star Trek 6, and so it incorporated vocabulary and some grammar stuff from Star Trek 5 and 6, the Next Generation, a little bit. And that's what they really took off. That's the one that sold a lot better. But I still didn't know that people were reading it so thoroughly until I got a call or an email or something from someone who I'd never heard of, named Lawrence Schoen. And he said that he runs something called the Klingon Language Institute. And I said, what's that? So he told me, well, there's a bunch of people interested in learning this language, and we get together and we do this and we do that. And I was like, really? I had no idea. So he and I got together for lunch or something. He told me all about this, and he invited me to a meeting of the KLI. It was held in Philadelphia, but I attended it by phone. I didn't go there in person. This is maybe the second meeting of the KLI ever, something like that. At some point during the meeting, this is before cell phones. There was a phone in the hotel room where they were meeting, and they called me on that phone and then passed the phone around from one person to another. And that was my introduction to Klingon speakers. I had no idea who I was talking to. I mean, they said their names, but they meant nothing to me at the time. A year later, there was another meeting, and they invited me to that one, but they didn't tell anybody I was going to be at that meeting. So when it got to the kind of the time in the meeting where the previous year I was on the phone, Lawrence said, remember last year we called Mark and we talked to him on the phone, but we can't do that this year because Mark is out of town. But we have somebody else as a guest. At that point, I walk into the room, and it was the strangest sensation I think I've ever had in my whole life, because everyone kind of turned around and went, oh, like that. And the reason that was strange is because how did anybody know who I was? This is before my picture was on the internet. My picture's not in the book. I wasn't on TV, but everyone knew who I was. It was really weird. And to this day, I don't know how people knew who this strange person walking into the room was. But anyway, so that's it. That's that in terms of background. Does anyone have any questions? I mean, I can go on and on and on, but I'd rather, answer the questions that you guys have.
Mark, how many other languages do you speak?
0 that I'll fess up to. I studied other languages. As a linguist, one doesn't necessarily speak a lot of languages. There's a lot of linguists who do. And the languages I spent I studied, in high school and stuff, studied Spanish and other things. In college, I studied Chinese, and at one time was pretty good in it, not anymore. And some other things, because of my day job. Making up Klingon is not a full-time job. It's becoming one. But when I was doing it, it certainly wasn't. So my day job was closed captioning, which is subtitles on TV for deaf people, not translation. And when I was doing that, I got very involved in the deaf community and learned American Sign Language. But the main thing I studied as a linguist was American Indian languages, mostly from the West Coast, mostly from around the San Francisco Bay Area. And at the time I was doing this, there was 0 speakers of these languages. So all of my work was based on documentation. It was based on notes that an anthropologist had written down or a missionary had written down or something like that. So the two languages I know the most about, I guess, are an American Indian language that nobody speaks. Actually, they're bringing it back, but at the time I was studying it, nobody was speaking it. And Klingon, which at the time I started working on it, nobody was speaking it. So got very good at languages that nobody speaks.
Would it be a better question to ask what languages are you familiar with? Is that better?
Yeah, I'm familiar with, Indo-European languages, French and Spanish and those kinds of things. And Chinese languages and languages related to Chinese. I studied Burmese for a little while and things like that, and American Indian languages. And people would normally phrase the question that I think you're asking, something like, what languages did you base Klingon on? Or what languages is Klingon based on? And the answer to that is, I hope nothing, for two reasons. One is Klingon is supposed to be a language from another planet, another place that shouldn't be related or sound like or resemble grammatically anything on Earth. And two, if I did make it to resemble something on Earth, say it resembled Portuguese, okay. Klingons in the original series and Klingons in Star Trek 3, which is all we knew about them at the time I made up the language, were mean dudes, and that's it. They were just tough and mean and warlike and uncooperative, and you wouldn't want to get near one. Okay, they were bad guys. The culture got very interesting when the next generation came along. But before that, they were just tough guys. So I didn't want to have my language resemble any real language, because as I say, if it resembles, say, Portuguese, then I've got everyone in Brazil and Portugal mad at me for making their language the basis for these awful people. It turns out it would have been an honor to have that be the case, but we didn't know that at the time. Having said that, so I went out of my way to not make it be like anything. Having said that, you can't help but be influenced by what you know. So all those languages that I'm kind of familiar with for one reason or another, there's little influence of them, of all of them in Klingon, but hopefully not in any way that anyone can really pick out. As I was going along, I kind of realized that, oh, what you're doing here is just like what they do in Navajo. Don't do that anymore. So I wouldn't necessarily erase what I just did, but I'd make sure that whatever I did next was very, very different. Okay, so there's influence of these things, but not intentionally. Somebody did a study shortly after the dictionary came out, comparing Klingon to the American Indian language that I did my doctoral work on, and determined that no, they are two different languages. Klingon is not based on that, except in the most general kinds of ways. I was very relieved to read that because that was the goal. But whoever wrote it was a Dutch person. It was done at a university in the Netherlands. There is one suffix in Klingon that does come from that American Indian language directly and means the same thing. And I did that on purpose as kind of an in-joke for myself. This Dutch person didn't catch that. That was the one resemblance that was really there. They didn't catch that.
Yeah, because the biggest misconception that I've seen in different Star Trek Facebook groups, that whenever Klingon is interpreted by English speakers or any known language speaker, they always try to compare it to something Germanic, something Yiddish, or something Hebrew. And I even have friends in Israel that are convinced 100% that your language, the language that we're talking about today, is based on sounds heard in Hebrew.
Yeah, and the reason for that is the and that, right?
Right. Now, I don't speak Hebrew, So I'm trying to learn from my Israeli friends, but it's hit and miss whenever I get a hold of them. But it just, and Alan Anderson here in the Midwest, he's confirmed what you have just said. No, it's not Germanic. It's not Yiddish. It's not Hebrew. None of that. It's just something similar to sounds that we already know.
And the reason those sounds are there is two reasons. One is in the original movie, in the motion picture, they're there. And second, in the script for Star Trek 3, it says, at certain points, Krug says in his guttural Klingon. So I read that in the script and said, well, I don't know what guttural means. It's not a technical term in linguistics, but it probably means. So if Krug says in his guttural Klingon something or other, then he better make it guttural, better fill it with. Yeah, so it was there from the get-go.
I found
Right.
that people always seem to find bits of their own language in Klingon, just because it uses. There's aspects of every language in every language kind of thing, and that's what people don't realize because they really haven't studied languages. So they come across Klingon, they go, "Oh, here's a little tiny bit of it that's similar to my language, therefore it must be based on my language."
Yeah, there's nothing in Klingon that can't be found in some human language or other. But the collection is unique. Those things should not be in the same language, the way human languages work, both in terms of the grammar and in terms of the sounds. So there's no sound in Klingon that you can't find in a human language. And that was because, here's a secret. All of the speakers of Klingon in the movies are humans. Did you know that? So they had to be able to say these sounds, right? But the sounds, there's no human language where that should have that particular collection of sounds. They don't go together, which is exactly what I intended, because Klingon is not a human language. So it shouldn't follow the human language rules, but it has to follow certain things so that humans can pronounce it. In fact, because of that, Klingon, if you pronounce it correctly, is difficult to pronounce because sounds next to each other just are uncomfortable. That's from a human language point of view. And I knew that going into it. But I figured that's okay, because in the movies, we only had to get the actors to say it correctly once. And then they don't have to say it again for the rest of their lives, right? It's a movie. Had I known that people were going to really speak it, people on Earth were going to pick up this book and say, "Hey, I'm going to do this," I might have done it a little differently. I'm glad I didn't, because it makes it a much more interesting language. But it's one of the reasons it's hard to pronounce is because it doesn't follow human language rules.
Now, have you worked with any of the actors from Discovery that play the Klingons? Because I know your protege, Robin Stewart, has been doing a beautiful job, and even the actress Mary Chieffo, said that she had to go to a second Klingon dictionary because she wore out the first one that she had.
Good.
And I was just, I was just curious if you had the pleasure of working with them and how much easier it was for them to learn the language than it was previous actors to have learned their lines in Klingon.
I have not worked with them. As you know, Robin and Alan Anderson are the ones who did all the Klingon work for Discovery. I didn't have anything to do with it except in little sneaky ways when they needed a new word. But there's hardly any of those. So they did all this stuff. I have worked with Discovery on languages other than Klingon, but not on Klingon. But your question about whether it was easier to learn and stuff is a really good one, because when I was working with the actors for Star Trek 3, which is the original stuff, I would say this, and we'd practice and practice and practice.